this or the title of this basically webinar is to visualize your potential, and we're talking about visualization and renderings and animations and all that kind of stuff. So there was sort of this big long blurb about it in case you're wondering what webinar you're supposed to be on or something. But in short, we're really going to talk about what makes a good visualization, and then show some examples of things we've done in the past. So I wanted to start out saying, what really is visualization, and that may be obvious to many folks, but visualization is sort of an umbrella term, if you will, that really covers a lot of different things, and those could be just physical, renderings, animations, some virtual reality, which we're going to get into, but that also could get into panoramas, 360 type spin, augmented reality, which we're starting to get a little bit more into, and really, a variety of different assets that are residuals of making a 3D model for display, for presentations, and that kind of stuff. And when I started thinking about this webinar and just showing hey, what we do and animations and renderings and that kind of stuff, there's a little sort of backstory. Folks have been doing renderings or animations for years and years and years, right, for centuries, and it just depends on the context and how you want to portray that in creating something that's aesthetically pleasing, and also that your client would want to see in the first place. So that might be something as simple as this is just a elevation sort of gray toned, if you will, but it also could get into more of a full-on elevation like this, and has depth and shadow and color, and it's more of a presentation type of drawing. A lot of stuff I'm sure you all have already done, nothing new there. But then y'all probably might recognize this from Frank Lloyd Wright, Falling Water. This is all hand drawn back then. So the computer and the models, if you're using BIM, that's starting to make life a little bit easier as far as showing and presenting, and not only just making this sort of a one-off picture like this is, but actually able to use that and to continue to build from your construction documents and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different things obviously that make a difference in the purpose or the reason behind doing a rendering or some kind of visualization is really the why side of it. Are we doing it for it's a part of our requirement of a contract? Is it part of a just to understand how a certain portion or part of the building is going together? What are we showing it for? Is it purely just marketing, or is it a requirement of the contract of the project? So those are all things that to address and to look at. But as I started sort of down this path and journey, if you will, I also thought, what are some things that make a good rendering, for example? So one thing that's very obvious, and not this big some lecture history lesson or something, but when we look at a rendering, we're obviously trying to mimic what's in reality, the real world. So we spend a lot of time making sure items like reflections and something as simple as like a chrome object is actually reflecting. And throughout the years we've learned to have something like chrome or something shiny, or even glass even, has to have something to reflect off of. So a lot of times when we're creating our scenes, if you will, or our models to show a building exterior or something, and we have some kind of shiny object or chrome, it has to have something to reflect off of. So even though many of these objects might not be in the camera shot itself, we actually have to put something behind there as a backdrop behind our camera so they can reflect off of. And even looking at this chrome, really kind of curvy bumper here, you can see the objects in the background. You can see the people standing there taking the picture. You can see the trees and the sky, because an object like chrome needs to reflect something. It's basically a mirror, and it's reflecting that image. And when it doesn't, it looks very gray and flat. So we spend a lot of time trying to really perfect that to make it look accurate and correct. Now, on those same lines and same vein, it gets into reflections. Now, that might be more a glass or a true mirror or something, but here in this case too, you're seeing that there is a floor surface, and it's actually reflecting this the mirror of this ball to see that. And again, and I kind of underline this idea that we're trying to mimic what's in the real world. Our eyes are really experts, if you will, of what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, and they know when something's off or something's wrong. I would even sort of guesstimate on this image here, the shadow seems a little bit hard on this thing, but that's another kind of conversation to get into, that it almost seems too hard and too pronounced and too dark, that it might make it a touch of disbelief. And basically, we don't want to have distractors in these images for folks. And I'll have some examples of projects we've done that we're going to get into, but I really want to kind of have some sort of a backstory of what really helps to make something look believable or not. Here again, just another example of I know this is just a sphere, but a lot of times there's actually test cases when we build out a scene or an image for folks, and we put these different objects in here to see what the reflections might be, or to see how light is bouncing, or sometimes you've maybe seen these sort of gray whitewash type of images, and those are all iterations or processes of those. So I have an example here to go through and just discuss a little bit. That this is a image from a project we did years and years ago, but it has some of those characteristics that I was just talking about. In, you know, maybe at the end of this whole webinar, you'll have more of a discerning eye to look at, hey, what is really good and what constitutes, you know, believability and getting the point across. And I know as well as you do that there's a balance of what is our timeline, what is our budget, and basically, there's all that kind of factors that play into that. Are we doing it in-house or outsourcing it? You know, how often do we do it? All those kind of things. But let's just take a moment to sort of look at this image and identify some things that, I'm fine being my own critic as well, but there's pros and cons, right? So this floor is a terrazzo floor, very highly polished, type of concrete floor. So we're expecting to see a certain level of reflections from light sources, from the ceiling lights, from the exterior lights, and that kind of stuff. So if I look down here, you can see some little light white spots, and those are exactly what we think to see in the floor of a shiny material. Objects and things are reflecting off of it, which is good and makes sense. Now along that same lines, those lights or those light sources are emanating true white light out of them. So these ceiling lights, for example, hopefully you can see my mouse, I'm sort of walking around looking at those ceiling lights. They are self-illuminating, so they're glowing, so they're pushing down. So if an object is shiny and reflective, it's going to pick those up. But there's always settings to adjust that, soften that, and do some different things to make that happen. Now, another thing we could look at in this rendering is there are these light bars, which is part of the design. These are little glass, almost like what I'd call you'd have on a backsplash or something. They just flooded this whole wall with that, but put these glow light bars, if you will, and it's doing a couple things. First, one, it's emanating light. It has this glow and sort of soft effect around it, and then we can also see those reflections down below, 1, 2, 3, 4, which kind of gives that natural understanding and light that would be coming in. Also, talking about light, our windows out here, there is a glass and a transparency to them. It's the distance is sort of fogged off because we're not trying to focus in on that, but you can actually see here some reflections of the chairs over here. So we're picking up that, which again, in the real world, if you walked into this airport terminal, we've probably all been in a airport terminal waiting on a flight, you'd expect to see this, and it makes sense, and it makes it's believable, if you will. And also here's this kind of tech bar, kind of do some work here. This sort of reddish panel here is like a plastic kind of panel, and it's reflective, so it's actually picking up some of the bar stool objects on here as well. So again, just some light components in here. We look over it, but taking a moment to dissect a little bit, you're like, oh, okay, that I understand that makes sense. Even to the point, it's kind of hard to see in this shot, but we have our lights here, and it's actually emanating a little direct sunlight on the floor, giving that almost a washed out effect, and that's what we'd expect to see on a nice sunny day, right? So some good characteristics, and actually you can see some light up here in the upper right corner. There's actually some clerestory windows. I'll show you in another shot. But again, you know, maybe the floor is considered too shiny. That's something to consider, you know, when you're looking at that end product. And basically, all of us who are watching this right now, and part of this, or any discussion you have with anybody, everyone has different opinions of what they consider that end result to be for a rendering, for an animation, for a VR experience, or whatever it may be. And that's it's easy for you to identify and say, hey, I like that, or I don't like that, but it's hard to really describe, you know, what your end result is. I know a lot of folks love a grainier, softer effect. Some people really like that very very in focus, almost like, wow, you know, it's almost too sharp or something. Sometimes things need to have a softness or a depth effect to it. And again, these are all things, you know, when we produce images for folks, or we produce work for folks, this is the kind of stuff that we look at, the care we take into consideration, and of how things look. So let's look at another shot of that same space, just turned a little bit and looking down the hallway. Now I was just sort of zooming in on the image just to give it some effect. Now this one has a little almost darker, if you will. The materials seem a little bit darker. The column colors are a little bit darker, so it makes it a little touch darker. But we were also trying to accentuate those light bars on the side again, so they have a glow effect. And it was really important for the designer for this to really, excuse me, to really pop and to look correct. Now again, we have the floor reflections. We just got done talking about very, very glassy. And in the computer, you can adjust that up and down, you know, to get that look, that feeling you want. But here you can see some of the light above. Okay, so again, just taking that discerning eye and really looking at, you know, what would we want to see and how would we want to see it. And you know, leading into this next piece, I always get people who are like, well, I can do a you know, camera shot from, you know, here or any angle, or up low, you know, maybe you've heard bird's eye, worm view before or something. And you're exactly right. Basically, where are we placing the camera? The location, you know, location, like where is that supposed to be? Sometimes you see people kind of turn the camera at an angle like you're tilting your head. And those are all, you know, styles and you know, artistic points of view or whatever, but there's actually technical terms for them, and here's a couple different ones to give you sort of an example, if you haven't ever heard of it, of, you know, how we perceive and look at stuff. And I know everybody's sort of an amateur you know, photographer with their phones or iPhones or Samsungs or whatever you have, that, you know, we get into a lot of photos, but that's sort of the same thing. We have to choose and place that when we create these renderings and animations, and where that camera sits. And, you know, people say, well, I can put it anywhere. Well, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So a couple different views here, just basically 5 sort of standard views we get into when we talk to people, like, okay, we're going to do a bird's eye view, and then we're going to drop low to a high view, and then kind of, you know, come in neutral view, almost is what you consider like, you know, your eyesight view, you know, which is default of 5'6". They say if that's kind of the average height for, you know, Americans or whatever. So, and then there's actually low shots. But I have some examples to sort of show you and share with you. And there's some, you know, rendering techniques and some different stuff. Now, this is an example. This is actually a real photo of, you know, the Eiffel Tower. This is obviously is that kind of worm's eye view looking up, but it's kind of hard to get a straight on shot with that because, you know, when you're standing there with a camera, you have to look up like that. But I found some other image examples, some model examples, and I just wanted to show you just kind of a cool picture of it first. Whoops, I think jumped around, sorry. And that is of a 3D model of the Eiffel Tower, you know, trees placed, and there's actually across, you know, in the background, there's actually some background of the city, actual photograph of the city. But here, you know, we're actually at kind of that eye level view, if you will, or what they call that normal view, but you'd almost be standing on some scaffolding or something to look at that, to get that true view. But obviously that's the advantage of doing some renderings and that kind of stuff to get that look and feel. Same with this sort of this mid-deck level we're up high, you know, you wouldn't ever be able to stand there unless you're on a helicopter or something, but we're getting a different view. We're getting a different understanding of the shot because of the camera placement. This is very important, right, when you make these shots, because I'm sure you've seen plenty of animations or even renderings where you're like, that's a really unexciting shot and it's just kind of blah, right? So when we can start to get these unique shots that you normally wouldn't see, people sort of like that. Or it's a creative shot, which is sort of, you know, this one, which is more perspective. It's, you know, it's actually taken from the river itself and looking back at it, kind of a up view, like you maybe potentially see that in reality or whatever. So that's another sort of angle. And then that's sort of the low view angle, just with the color washed out or whatever, but just to give you some kind of perspective and understanding. And what I want to do is, before we get too far into this, it's sort of just a back-end history and some discerning eye type of stuff for you, is we actually have a poll, a question for you guys, and I'm going to let Amy jump in here to ask that question and just get some feedback and response from you all, just to get some you know, interaction, if you will. So Amy, if you want to jump into the poll, that would be awesome.
All right, so if you guys could answer this poll question, would outsourcing visualization be an option for you? Yes, no, or do you need to learn more about it? We'll give you some time to vote. Looks like most people are saying they need to learn more about it, which is exactly why you're here today. I'll give that another couple of seconds before I close that out. So if you haven't voted, please go ahead and submit your vote. All right. Here we go, and I will share those results. No one just says yes, so it looks like 80% say they need to learn more and 20% say no. Thank you, everybody, for answering that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome, and that's sort of what we expected, right? You're not just going to be like, boom, we're going to just jump off the deep end and go, and that's part of what this webinar or conversation is really about, is to, one, educate you a little more about, obviously, renderings, animations, different visualization type things out there, but now actually getting in and discussing a little more about what some of our service and offerings are. But sort of the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to partially share and show some of the examples and projects we've done for folks, and just sort of explain that, what we can do, you know, along the way. So I was just going to share a couple pictures. Some of these might be stretched a little bit big just to fit on the screen, but again, going of that discerning eye we were just talking about, with lighting and reflection and shadows and that kind of stuff, and that believability, you know, you can kind of look at these a little more discerning and say, hey, you know, that I believe that, you know, and obviously with there's always that budget time, you know, schedule constraint in there as well. And another thing to look at too, since we're talking about this, is in nature, in the real world, things aren't always perfect or exact as they can be. So a lot of times we identify, looking at something, when you look at a grass, you know, usually people will have like a swatch of grass, maybe it's 3 feet by 3 feet, and that just gets repeated, and you can start to see that it either looks like a very perfectly mowed lawn, or it just looks out of place, if you will. Same with cars and people, and, you know, we call the entourage. You need kind of that kind of peppered or in those images to give you just sort of a better feel and look. And again, this was basically a bank project we did for a client years ago. It was in North Carolina, and they wanted to show their building that they're putting together and how it looked, and I have some other shots of it as well, but that I'll be able to refer back to. But it was to give them understanding, hey, what's this thing going to look like? And it might be hard to see in this, but see how some of the glass up here is like dark, and then there's actually this sort of step down that gets lighter, and there were actually different glass colors in there that actually did this jagged, you know, drop down as you went around the building. And that was really important to show. So you'll see that once you start moving around it, it actually is on purpose. It wasn't, you know, a mistake or something. So anyways, just again, sharing some of that stuff. And then here's just a quick shot. They actually wanted a shot in their kind of boardroom, and they wanted to, what that might look like to convey that idea. And this helps to tell a story. This was done probably 5 years ago, actually. So you can think, hey, that was some technology back then. There's even better and newer technology to look at and consider to maybe improve that. And we've learned, even nowadays, and I have another shot to show you this. I'll get to it wherever I'll find it. But basically, we've learned that, sometimes you need to have papers or some messy stuff on the table just for that believability, or maybe a plant in the corner or something. That those are just soften it and help for the believability of it. And one thing we didn't focus in on too much in the past, but even the floor, the baseboard, the toe kick kind of board, usually a vinyl type of thing. It looks really odd when that's not in there. And we've had some animations renderings in the past that didn't have it, and you're just like, what's off about that? So it's something as small or simple as that can make all the difference in the world. Here's another example. That same terminal we looked at a minute ago with the terrazzo and the shiny floor, this is sort of at the end of that long hall we were looking at, and you can see some of the same repeat of the type of materials and equipment, but even showing this carpet would be something we call the depth effect, where the readability of that carpet pile. And here you can even see some of the chrome reflections of those on those chairs or whatever. That just helps to understand it. And I think on here too, basically, when you talk about the services, our visualization services, that umbrella visualization we talked about, well, the services we're providing or offering to folks, rendering, animation, virtual reality, even the more interactive type of experiences, and then general modeling as well. And so what is that, especially when you talk about the VR, virtual reality, what does that really mean? I'm sure you guys have seen some commercials or seen some different stuff that might have it, but really it's a more of an immersive type experience. We actually have a cave, a room in our new office by the Perimeter Mall, and love to have you guys come out there and see that. Wearing the goggles, it's very interactive, first person. It's almost like the gaming environment, and you have this free range and you can move and walk around. Sometimes it's stationary where you can look around, and then you have the free range where you jump to different points. And some of that's hard to show in a webinar thing like this, but it's almost something you got to experience, and we'd love to have you guys come out there. So you can always contact us after this webinar. We'd love to share and show that stuff with you. Let's see. Here's a good example of another project that we did. And again, some of those finishes that we were talking about, that the look and believability, I'm sure you can start to point them out. One, we have a light source, the fluorescent lights on the ceiling emanating light. We have windows with glass, putting light in. Here's the light source putting on there. We got different chair and furniture equipment. You got some light reflection down here. These exhaust things are even, the HVAC is even kind of a chrome type of material to show that. But the funny thing about this rendering, the focus was the carpet, so to show the quality, the detail, the pile height. And I have another angle or shot from this same space, to give you a different perspective, but because they really wanted to see the carpet and what the depth and height and the pattern of it. So you can see in here there actually was some a different color. These were like tile plank type things, but you can see they have different, almost like a cobblestone patterning on them. That's the pile height itself. So multiple things going on, but to be able to see that, believe it, understand it. But even going back to our little bit previous conversation about camera placement, what's a good way or place to put that camera? You can see from this one, we're kind of up higher. You'd almost be standing on the desks here looking down, versus going back to this other one, we're standing sort of looking down the hallway, or this corridor space, if you will. And just from a perspective standpoint, looking directly just at the carpet itself, you can really see that cobblestone I was talking about, and then this other higher pile height, and just, different patterning within the pattern of the carpet itself, which was kind of unique in itself. But again, just showing you some quality technique, the things we look at and address when we create these different type of projects for folks. And we've obviously even had some strange and odd type of projects. Like this was some equipment we had to produce for a company, and they wanted some more straight kind of direct on shots. But it's kind of like a same as if you're doing some kind of piece of furniture or whatever. Now I want to show you all this as an example. So this picture on the left is actually a photograph of a cabinet, and it looks like it's in a bathroom kind of thing, and this client would physically build these, create these mock walls and hang up stuff and different stuff, and then take a photograph and then destroy it, right? Well, we said, well, what if we modeled that or created that for you? So we actually, showing here on the right is the model and the rendering of that similar space. So the one on the left is real physical and a photograph. The one on the right is the actual model and rendering of it. The nice thing about that is the big cost comparison difference. The one on the right was fraction of what the one on the left cost, and the time and the labor and materials and that kind of stuff. But the advantage on top of that is we could change it up, and that's what they were really excited about, this client was. So for example, if I go to this next image here, I call it design options, but basically there's that same shot or space, but we actually put a lighter wood finish material on it. And then you click on, go to and have another image. There's the darker material, different floor, finishes and that kind of stuff. And then we said, well, what if we did a totally different, light wood, totally different background, different things. So that was the advantage of that. We could change that. We could stretch this longer, bigger, smaller, whatever we want to. So those are just some different ideas and concept, where some people just think, hey, I just need this one shot of my building. That also could be used as some design iterations and different things. And I know many of you, either are, animators or work in the rendering, or sometimes you just don't have the time to do it. That's sort of where we come in and to help out, to have us finalize your project, to create these type of images, and let you focus on your type of thing. So I want to show you one or two other pictures. This was an exterior shot. Again, and we showed a lot of interior stuff and different things, but this was basically was a small little brick building. A church took it over, and they say, hey, we want to see what it's going to look like when we expand it, and we put all these different finishes, just to kind of break it up. So we really literally used this as a process to sort of finalize the design, but we used it in conjunction with Revit. So we actually Revit, BIM modeled this, and then brought that into our 3ds Max software. So that might be even some questions y'all have, like what is the process? And then we, re-rendered it out and did it that way. But we were able to keep sort of everything interconnected, and then get these great end results and say, yeah, this is what you want to do, and then go back to Revit and continue the, the overall process or whatever. So that was exciting and unique in its of its own. So I did have one more poll question here. I'm going to jump over to and let Amy take over for a second, and just to get some feedback from you all. Again, more interactive. So Amy, I'll let you take that.
All right. So what type of visualizations are you creating currently? The options are rendering, animations, VR, or none. Please go ahead and enter your vote. All right, we have about 57% that have voted. If you can go ahead and answer this poll question, that would be great. Give it a little bit longer. All right. I'll go ahead and close this out and share the results. It looks like 20% are creating creating renderings, 20% creating animations, and 60% not doing it at all.
All right, fantastic. Well, I appreciate y'all's feedback and responding to that in honesty. And you know that's not surprising. You know, a lot of folks, or if you are, maybe you're doing a one-off and it's, you know, once a year or something like that. But what we're finding now, or more so, you know, is like the renderings, the animations are becoming more commonplace in the industry, and where people want to see those type of images. And I'll talk about this shot here a little bit more, but the idea of the virtual reality where you're able to immerse yourself and move through the space is almost becoming the primary thing. In the renderings and animations, more of the what I call the canned set path or specific camera shot is sort of the byproducts of those. And again, we're hoping we're more on the cutting edge of that, but you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? I mean, it really helps to identify and tell a story and explain, you know, what's going on. And you know, obviously that's where we come in, and we'd love to, you know, help convey your design and ideas to your clients, or, you know, marketing purposes, whatever it may be. So, and that's really what I wanted to share and show with some of these pictures. So I can go through some more of these. You know, I have a bunch of different ones to choose from. I actually have some animations, but they're choppy, meaning that pushing them through this GoToWebinar, they kind of, you know, they get jumpy. They like skip a little bit, so that might not be worth showing them. But we do have those on our website, which we'll share where that's located here in just a little bit. And then you could actually see and view those for yourself. So again, I'm just going to show a couple other shots. Again, this one's, you know, conveying some condos that were being built and what that looks like in background and different stuff. And I have another example here I think you might like, which just is more product design. So this is a golf club. It was, you know, we actually did this rendering effect to give it more of this hand sketch feel almost, and did some shading a little bit to it. But then in that same shot, we actually applied the colors, we applied the look, the logos, the stickers, and that kind of stuff, but left this wired outline of the model edge itself to kind of give it this sort of techie look, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the final or last shot was actually with the shadows and some light and reflections and that kind of stuff. But the client ended up using this in promotional materials to really show, and did some different blend effects. And I think we have, oh, this is a putter example. And again, seeing that color, finishes, reflections, and materials was important to be able to convey that and share that. And then here is an example, just that exterior sort of perspective shot. I just was sort of moving it across here, but again, to convey the idea, the overall concept, the look, the feel. You can see the trees in the background, and really kind of filling that space to make it look believable, and really, you know, sell that as a concept or an idea. Now, I'll point out, and you know, everybody's their own critic or whatever, but we make sure we like to, or spend time, something as simple like these trees here, is we can actually change them. You can see some are a little bit different height than each other. The tree root, not the root, but the branch structure is different and changes. They call it the seed count. And, you know, that's true in nature. There's no two trees that are identical. Even their placement of where they're planted. One might be up a little bit forward, one might be taller, one might be shorter. So we place that in there, and that helps it make it be more believable or realistic. And that's something, again, to identify. And again, I think that hopefully the takeaway from this is, wow, hey, we might need some renderings or animation. You know, these folks take great care in doing that. So, you know, just even if you don't do that and you go down the road, keep that discerning eye to look into that. We've also done some different things where it's just, you know, this is a, you know, for oh, jumped ahead of me on there, but a product, you know, conference, you know, space, and you know, they had their product or whatever. Again, here's another shot: trees, people, cars, different things, you know, on there moving around. Again, some more shots. just to convey and look at those ideas. Again, a little bit of combination: water, reflections, sky, the light, the reflections. And again, I don't want to. We could be spend all day looking at some of these and really digesting them and dissecting them to break it apart. Some of these are just sort of changing. Here's something you might appreciate. This is, remember the bank I showed earlier? This is a top view of that. So here, and actually at this scale, look, you can actually see sort of that repeat pattern of the grass I talked about. But at this angle is probably the only one you'd be able to see it at. But we had the ability to really show any angle or direction. So this was important to be able to do that. But again, being my own worst critic, I guess. And here's another shot, more overall. And you can even see in the background, there was actually some existing buildings back here that we wanted to capture, but we didn't want to draw attention to them. So we just left them as sort of gray box massing. And here you can see that glass step-down colorization on the front curved wall. And here's just another angled shot of that. So making this model, we were able to produce all these different images, all these different views of that same project. And then even here's sort of the back drive-through teller view, if you will. So again, just, another conversation is determining what do you want to see, what's important, what design highlight. We walk through that whole process when folks say, hey, we want a rendering of our building. Okay, what is it for? When do you need it by? Is it going to be printed? Is it going to be on digital? Is it going to be on your website? Is it marketing purposes? What do you want to show? Do you want multiple shots? Those kind of discussions we like to have with folks, just to get a better understanding of it, and also what time is involved. Because if you said, well, I only want the front, I don't care about the backside, that wouldn't be something that was modeled or created. Here's another interesting kind of project. This was just a design. It actually was the existing building, church on the right, and then they were expanding off to the left, and they're actually playing around with this end roof design, and we actually ended up having a gable design on it. But we wanted to show what that will look like for the folks who would be, going into this building and using it. So, showing some cars and showing some different backdrop and different things in there. But with that same model, same view, we're actually able to do a straight-on, more direct, what I would call, a traditional elevation, direct shot to really convey the design, the idea, and just to get a different perspective or view of it. And I'll sort of start to wrap up this, our visualization conversation here. And I wanted to show just two different shots where, and this is an animation we can share with you if you're interested. But basically, this was a historic preservation project, and they wanted to show what the new design was going to look like, but also preserving the history of this building. So new signage, new light up neon, and then they're buying these two little buildings off to the left. So we were trying to show people and cars and activity and kind of what this would look like in real context. And you can see down by these buses, these other buildings are of less importance. We kind of grade them, wash them out. But this is a believable, shot. You could be, hey, I was standing on the other side of the street and I could see this building. But because there was unique neon and interesting nighttime type of thing, we actually did a nighttime shot and what that would look like with the neon and the glow and how much of the street and underlighting they would need, and the lights of the cars. But just to convey that in the sky is a totally different feel, totally different look, but one that was of great importance. And we really spend a lot of time and effort to convey folks' ideas, their designs, that look and that feel and that emotion, if you will, and the overall believability of looking at something that, hey, this could actually be a photograph or something I believe is real, and to see what that really is going to look like when it's physically built. And again, that's why we started offering these visualization services. We had folks coming to us, sort of as a one-off, if you will, and then became more and more and more. And so we just formally launched it and said, we're just going to offer this out to folks because, one, it takes a lot of time and talent to become really good at this stuff. and we know people have their day jobs, is what we say, and we want to be able to help them out so they can take their designs, take their ideas, and let us produce these nice images for them, whether it's a still or an animation or some kind of virtual reality experience that they can convey to their clients, or they can share for marketing purposes to get more projects and just to really show their design skills. So a lot of information we sort of covered today, but I really wanted to leave a couple minutes for some questions that you all might have, and but to share what we're offering to folks and down the road, or however we can help you. We'd love to be able to do that. So Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you and see if there's any questions from folks, and see if we can't get those answered.
All right. Yeah, we have a couple coming through. Can you start with our Revit models for VR?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and sometimes that's a lot more helpful than just like a napkin sketch or something. So we can integrate and work with Revit models. We've even done just with flat 2D CAD type models as well, where we really have your design intent then. So we can take that and move it forward into our additional modeling software, and then bring it into VR. Now, it's not what I would say the magic bullet. It's really, a lot of times people say, well, I have a model, and so that must be, you're good and you're ready to go. Well, it's sometimes they didn't put a ceiling in, or they didn't put the right window in, they just put a generic door in or something. So to answer the initial question, yes, we can use it, but sometimes we have to add more things to really make it as valuable and really what their true product might be in there. So yeah, but that's a great question.
Great. Also, how long does the rendering take?
Well, that's sort of a loaded question too. Obviously depends on the level of detail, and some of you might be familiar with AIA, American Institute of Architects, uses this LOD 100 through 500. Basically, it's a way of us to determine what kind of information we put in there. Is it every nut, bolt, screw, or is it just an overall design idea, concept? And even kind of feeding into the previous question, do we have a Revit model to start with? Do we have a CAD file to start with? And part of our process is to walk through and determine what you'd want to see. What shot are you looking for, and what is really important? Is it multiple shots? We go through and kind of determine that as a scope of work at the very beginning to really figure out what exactly you want to see, so we know the level of detail, and then how much time usually that would put into it. And so everybody agrees to the same thing, and everybody knows what to expect, and that usually kind of backwards out how long does it take, and a fee associated with it. So there's no magic thing like, oh, we can get that back to you in 2 days. Usually, people are waiting a little bit longer to get us involved. So I'd say the earlier the better. That's going to help us plan and do stuff more. So every project's sort of different, but there's usually days in between there and sometimes we'll create a rendering, give it to you, and you'll say, oh man, that doesn't look right, and they have on your end have to design something different. So, but all that kind of back knowledge information helps us to put together, and we'll actually scope out and say, hey, this is going to be a 2-week project, or a 6-day project or something. So going in, everybody knows what that expectation is. So yeah, awesome. That's another great question.
All right, it looks like there's one more question. What type of software do you use?
So we use a lot of different stuff, different software. We try to be a little software agnostic, even though our background in our company is in Autodesk resellers, and we use a lot of Autodesk products. We're not just strictly biased to those. So our typical workflow excuse me, would be either coming from a Revit or a CAD, bringing that into 3ds Max, which is a software we tend to like to use, and then if we're going out into VR or some other virtual reality type stuff, we'd get into like an Unreal or Unity type of software. But we don't stick to one specific product, if you will. We've had folks who have sent us MicroStation files. We've had folks who've used Rhino, you know, and like I said, once you get into some different areas, especially like the VR side, the Unity and the Unreal, and even some other products where we have more interactivity with a BIM model in the VR environment, that is really cool. That, you know, there's new technology coming out more and more. So, you know, it's sort of open-ended, if you will, to what specific software we use. But at its core, we typically work with 3ds Max because we do have that higher level of controllability and how the model and the surfaces do work. But really, you know, venture into different ones that help us accomplish what we need to accomplish. So another great question. I appreciate that.